The next time you toss a handful of dark grapes into your mouth, pay attention to this. Within about 30 minutes, something inside your bloodstream is going to change. Not eventually, not over weeks, in minutes. The inner lining of your arteries, the same lining doctors track when they're measuring cardiovascular age, starts to relax. Blood moves differently, the vessels widen, and you have no idea it's happening. Think about it. The grapes on the cheese board last weekend, the ones you rinsed and dropped into your kid's lunchbox, the ones sitting in your fridge right now, next to leftovers you're already forgetting about. One of the most ordinary fruits on the planet, and one of the most misunderstood, because the label calls it a snack. The biochemistry tells a very different story. Here's what most people believe about grapes. They're a snack. They're mostly sugar. If you're being careful about carbs, you skip them. If you're not, you don't think twice. Nobody really talks about grapes the way they talk about berries or leafy greens. Grapes are just there. Background fruit, lunchbox filler. That assumption is the problem. And it's not your fault. It's what the last 2 decades of fruit marketing have trained everyone to think. The darker the berry, the better. Grapes are for cheese plates and toddlers. Meanwhile, walk into any supplement aisle. There's an entire shelf built around a single compound, sold in capsules, marketed as an anti-aging molecule, priced anywhere from $20 to $60 a bottle. Bloggers write about it, podcasts debate it, longevity clinics inject it. That compound is sitting in the skin of the grapes in your fridge, right now, for free. The label says fruit. The biochemistry says something the supplement industry would rather you never sit down and think about too carefully. And the science on what it actually does in your body starts in one very specific place. Now here's where it starts. The compound is called resveratrol. It's a polyphenol, a plant defense molecule the grape produces in its skin to protect itself from fungus, sun stress, and injury. Dark and red grapes carry the highest concentrations. Green grapes barely register. When you eat those grapes, resveratrol enters your bloodstream and heads straight for one of the most overlooked tissues in your entire body, the endothelium. The endothelium is the thin, one-cell thick lining that coats the inside of every blood vessel you have, every artery, every vein, every capillary. It doesn't just sit there, it's a chemical decision maker. Every second, it's deciding how open your vessels are, how sticky your blood is, whether your circulation runs hot or cold. Resveratrol walks into that lining and flips a switch. It activates an enzyme called endothelial nitric oxide synthase, ENOS, which produces nitric oxide, a tiny signaling gas that tells the smooth muscle around your arteries to relax. When those muscles relax, the vessels widen, blood moves more freely, pressure eases. Oxygen and nutrients get where they're going faster. Picture this. Imagine your arteries as a network of garden hoses. Over the years, the walls get a little stiffer, a little more reluctant to expand. The water still moves, but the pressure builds and the reach gets shorter. What resveratrol does is soften the grip on those walls, so the same water flows further with less strain. A 2011 study published in Nutrition, Metabolism, and Cardiovascular Diseases measured what's called flow-mediated dilation, a direct read of how well your arteries can widen before and after volunteers consumed a single dose of resveratrol. The improvement showed up in about an hour. Dose-dependent, measurable. And this is the part most people miss. You've felt this system fail before. Cold hands in a slightly cool room, heavy, sluggish focus in the middle of the afternoon that a walk somehow clears. That's an endothelium not producing enough nitric oxide. Not dramatic, but real. If this is catching you off guard the same way it caught me when I first read the research, take 1 second, hit like on this video, and subscribe. This channel exists to dig into the science nobody puts on the label. Now here's the part that surprises people even more. Resveratrol isn't working alone in there. Riding in the same skin, in almost the same molecular neighborhood, is a second compound called quercetin. Quercetin is a flavonoid, the same molecule that gives red onions their bite and green tea some of its punch. In dark grapes, it's concentrated in the skin, especially the outer waxy layer most people never think about. And it does something completely different than resveratrol. Resveratrol tells your vessels to relax. Quercetin protects them from getting damaged in the first place. Here's how. Every day, the inner walls of your arteries take a slow beating, not from anything dramatic, from ordinary things. A high-sugar meal, poor sleep, stress hormones, secondhand smoke drifting in from the next room. Each of those triggers free radicals and inflammatory signals that make the endothelium sticky. The wall starts expressing more of a molecule called VCAM1, which behaves like Velcro for passing immune cells. Those cells stick, dig in, and start the very first step of plaque formation. Decades before you'd feel a thing. Quercetin blocks that Velcro. It suppresses the inflammatory signaling that turns VCAM1 on. It also shields the enzyme that makes nitric oxide from being burned out by oxidative stress. In practical terms, it keeps your vessels young. Picture this. Your arteries are a smooth marble slide. Every day, tiny grains of sand land on it. Over years, the surface goes from glass to sandpaper. That's the endothelial aging nobody sees and nobody feels until a stress test in their 50s says something is wrong. Quercetin is what keeps sweeping the sand off. A 2016 meta-analysis published in the Journal of the American Heart Association pooled 7 randomized trials of quercetin supplementation and found statistically significant reductions in both systolic and diastolic blood pressure, with the strongest effects at higher doses over 8 weeks or more. And here's what connects the picture. Resveratrol is fast, minutes. Quercetin is slow, cumulative. It doesn't announce itself. It just keeps that inner lining from turning to scar tissue over decades of ordinary meals you've eaten and forgotten. So who's benefiting the most here? Not the person eating grapes once at Christmas, not the person picking green over dark because they look prettier on a plate. It's the quiet, unglamorous person who tosses a small handful of dark or red grapes into their afternoon routine, day after day, year after year, while their neighbor spends $60 a month on capsules chasing the same molecule. Meanwhile, the person cutting grapes out because fruit is just sugar is walking past a free vascular repair tool sitting in their own kitchen. The endothelium doesn't send warnings, it sends bills. Decades later, as a pressure reading, as a stress test, as a scan, the label calls it a snack. Your arteries call it maintenance. It wasn't detox, it was damage control. So what do you actually do with this? First, eat the skin. Almost every biologically active molecule in a grape lives in the outer skin, not the pulp. Peeling grapes strips out the entire point. Freeze them, roast them, cut them, blend them, whatever you like. Just don't remove the skin. Second, go dark. Red, purple, black, concord. The pigment is the polyphenol. The darker it looks, the more resveratrol and quercetin are concentrated inside it. Green grapes are pleasant. They are not the same food. If your goal is the vascular effect, dark is not a preference. It's the whole story. Third, small, consistent doses. A cupped handful, roughly a cup, or about 100 grams, most days of the week, does more than a giant plate once a month. The flow-mediated dilation improvements measured in the acute response studies come from steady, repeated exposure, not from a weekend binge. Set them at eye level in the fridge. Make them the default. Fourth, pair with fat. Skip the sugar. Polyphenols like resveratrol and quercetin absorb better when you eat them alongside a small amount of fat, a wedge of aged cheese, a few walnuts, a spoon of full-fat yogurt. And don't drink your grapes. Grape juice strips the fiber and concentrates the fructose without proportionally boosting the polyphenol payoff. Whole beets juice, almost always. You're not someone who just eats grapes anymore. You're someone who understands what resveratrol does to your endothelium in the first 30 minutes after your body absorbs it. You understand what quercetin quietly prevents in the walls of your arteries every single day, one meal at a time. You understand that the compound the supplement industry is selling by the capsule has been sitting in the skin of the darkest grapes in your fridge the whole time. And you understand what happens to that entire system when it stops getting fed, day after day. There's another everyday ingredient sitting in almost every kitchen right now, cheaper than grapes, more common than salt, doing something to your body most people have never been told about. And in the next video, we're going to pull it apart compound by compound. You're going to look at your pantry very differently.